Hey, everybody. Welcome to tonight's late night happy hour. Brian Kamenetzky, Andy Kamenetzky joined tonight. Very excited. Very happy to just literally see this guy, one of the best guys working in the NBA. Nicest dude you'll ever meet. Ohm Youngmisuk covers the NBA for ESPN.
I thought you were introducing me, Brian.
No.
I was like, wow.
Plenty of you.
After all these shows together, it's like the first time he sees me. It's really nice.
And the asshole I usually work with, and Ohm Youngmisuk also joining us tonight. How are you?
I was just thinking about this the other day. Have you guys been to Staples? Have you guys been back?
Once. I went to one game. I did.
It was so strange, right? Because people watching at home, obviously there's an arena with no fans, limited employees from Staples. Media is like maybe not even a quarter of what it used to be. And then, when we eat outside by the statues. There's like an outdoor area where the statues are. And you basically pick a table and you eat like a boxed lunch of like a cold sandwich. And what it used to be for the media is that we used to be in this big dining room and we used to have like the soft serve ice cream machine and buffet. And I would always see these two guys eating outside doing work and, get ice cream and talk to you guys or whatever. And I was just thinking the other day, like, when is that going to ever return? Like, and is it going to return like in a different world now? It's like, back in the day, like everybody would be touching the same ice cream machine. Now, I don't touch the ice cream machine anymore.
I'm not going to lie to you. I mean, this probably is as good a time as any to say I would never touch the ice cream after you used it. I would wait until someone else came by. I had my little wipe. It was just for you. But I'll tell you my thoughts after, but like, what did you think when you went back and watched a game? Because neither one of us were in the bubble. So like this was sort of my first experience with this type of deal.
Very strange. And I think when I watch, and so I'm a guy that's really into game ops. So I love going to different arenas and seeing the presentation for the fans and what different arenas do with their mascots and the music and all that. And it's funny that these arenas continue the music. Some arenas, like I was watching a Wizards game the other night, they still have the in-game hosts talking in between timeouts to no fans, like doing like the same, like, little like quizzes and things like that. I'm thinking like, are they quizzing people back at home and people answering on Twitter? Like, I couldn't really understand that. I see maybe they're just trying to keep the same schedule going and the same routine so that when fans do come back, it's all good. Cause there are some buildings that still allow fans in, by the way, which I've heard is really a weird experience too. I think we ran into one writer who was actually on the road from Minneapolis covering the Timberwolves, and he had just come from Utah. And he was saying it was so strange having fans not far behind you in a suite, no mask, because they were drinking and eating. But, when you're in a suite and you're drinking and eating, you're doing it for like an hour or plus. So you're not putting your mask back on. And so it's a little uncomfortable. I think for us at Staples, it's safe. But it's still a really weird experience. And then the other thing too is our seats are high. So because
Quinn says in the chat we need kiss cam with coaches and staff as long as they're wearing masks. I mean, that's one of those things you absolutely have to wear the mask.
A lot of coaches are not. They pull down the mask. I've also been noticing a lot of coaches are wearing this mask now that Ty Lue had on the other day, and Tom Izzo has it in Michigan State. It looks like a see-through. Almost like if it was like the lingerie version of mask, because your nose and your mouth. And I'm wondering like why coaches are preferring this mask, because there's also like a little rope tied area that you can like literally, if you let it hang around your neck, you could. And it just seems like coaches seem to prefer this version of the mask. But one thing I'll say about being where we are now, we sit like basically on the top of the 100 level. Normally back in the day, we sat on the floor. And so now,
maybe you did. Andy and I were often seated in the 100 level. So
football experience when they, you can an NFL
nice
game.
Flex, home. We get it.
Yeah, we get it.
So I've been bringing my binoculars to these games and watching like the behavior on the sideline, and now you get a better view of like interaction between like if I'm watching Paul George and Patrick Beverly and seeing what the chemistry is like going on during a timeout, or if somebody's barking at each other or anything like that. And actually, the first preseason game or second preseason game, I noticed Chauncey Billups wasn't on the sidelines, and neither was Reggie Jackson. And then all of a sudden we found out that due to safety and health protocols, they weren't there. And I don't know if I would have saw that if I was in my normal corner on the floor, where around fans everywhere around us. I mean, I think eventually I would have seen it, but and if I was at home, I might not have seen it either.
I've told you many times, when you stop to sign autographs, as you do, you aren't watching the game. You're not doing your job. That's not why ESPN is sending you.
I've been asked for an autograph, I think twice, and the Giants writers will not let me live this down. We were at New York Giants training camp in Albany, New York, and a kid had this flag, and he had autographs from like all these players, Justin Tuck, Eli Manning, and he asked me for an autograph, and I was like, what? Why would you even know who I am? Like, nobody knows who I am. And the guy's like, no, I want an autograph. And I go, I don't want to ruin your flag. I literally told him, I am not signing that flag, because 15 years from now, or 20 years from now, when you look back, you're going to be like, who is this Ohm Youngmisuk, and why is he on my flag next to Justin Tuck? Like, why did you do this? I was like, I'm saving you. I am not going to ruin your thing. And all the Giants writers got on me because they were just like, why were you such an asshole to this fan?
You should have signed it. You should have signed it Michael Strahan.
Oh yeah. That would have been a good one.
I've had that same experience too. Like, there's been a few times where I've actually been asked for an autograph, and like, I know one time, I remember Brian and I years ago, we got sent to Indianapolis to do something for the Indy 500, and I am like 97% sure this kid who asked me for an autograph thought I was a driver. And because it's like one of the few professional athletes that I could pass as, like, I don't have the requisite height, weight, outward athleticism, whatever, in terms of just sheer stereotyping this, but I could pass for an Indy driver. And I think this kid thought that's who I was, because I was in an area with a bunch of other drivers. And I just signed this thing. I think I may have ruined whatever it was that had all these other signatures of actual drivers, but I didn't want to let this kid down, so I just signed for him.
Here's a good question from Granted LA. Could Andy pass himself off as a professional bowler? Does he have that kind of athleticism?
No, I'm going to say this right now. I am in too good of shape to be accused as a professional bowler. Have you seen those dudes?
Not all of them. I'm going to put this up on the poll.
We're not going to start doing hashtag not all bowlers. Like, they're in bad shape. Like the average.
I disagree. I've seen some of those guys in shape. Now, see, I was about to say your goatee is like a pro athlete type of goatee. So I think you would be able to sell yourself off of something, maybe baseball or something, because not all baseball players are ripped.
That's true.
Oh, no, yeah, but most baseball players aren't 5'8".
Yeah, that's the thing. Is I mean, I'd have to pass myself off as like a second baseman, maybe, or something like that. I mean, I would be too short for the average outfielder. I can't play first. I mean, maybe certain parts of the infield. I'm shorter than a lot of pitchers.
You could be a baseball coach too. You could be a baseball assistant coach, because in baseball there are a lot
that's possible.
Too. So,
right, the scenario that plays out there, Andy, is you are a person who you had a lot of baseball talent, but because you're a little guy, 5'8", whatever, you only made it as high as A ball, and then you became a coach. So like that would work, particularly at spring training, when like you could be the first base coach for the rookie league team that will stay for extended spring training. Like that is possible. Like
Rancho Cucamonga. Like on the first base. Okay. But that doesn't feel like a professional athlete to me.
You don't think
at one point you were.
Andy can't be AAA? He can't be AA? No?
No, he's not a good enough coach.
Yeah,
he was not in my scenario, he's neither a good enough baseball player to make the major leagues or a good enough coach to get to AAA.
That's what I'm saying. Not as a player.
Who's okay? Let me start. If you had to pass yourself off as a baseball coach, like a position coach, something like that, and you knew you were going to start getting quizzed by some big baseball fan who's going to start peppering you with the way you go about coaching people, whatever, what position are you choosing?
Well, I think I would have to sell myself off as like the translator, first of all. So I think that's probably would be my story.
That's a good
I
move.
don't know what I would. I don't know what else I would. I don't know if I can come up with a good enough story.
Because, like, for example, like when I played baseball, I played catcher for a while, and I was actually
Oh, God, here comes
a
the
pretty
story.
good catcher. No, but the problem was I ended up, because I had knee issues, having to switch to outfield. I was a god awful outfielder. Like, I mean, horrible at outfield. So my attempts to try to pass as an outfield coach, something like that, I would end up getting completely exposed because I have no idea how to line up a fly ball. That was part of my problem. I made every single routine fly ball look like a highlight reel catch if I actually made it, because I would misjudge everything and then have to either like make some diving catch or some running backwards over the shoulder, which if I did it looked incredible. But most of them just ended up me totally misjudging it. The ball drops, I have to throw it in. So like I would get exposed trying to do that. Like I'm trying to think of, like, I guess, but
I could pull off baseball coach.
You think so?
I can do that.
Okay. All right.
I couldn't pull off baseball player anymore, but I could pull off baseball coach.
Let's widen this, Ohm. If you were going to fake yourself as a coach of any sport, what are you choosing?
Based on like my knowledge of the sport?
Based on your knowledge, on what you think would be the easiest to fake?
I would probably say I was like a tennis coach, something like that. Because I grew up playing tennis. I was a manager of the Michigan State tennis team. So I'd probably say that. But the thing is, like, today's players, like, I know obviously players that are like older players. Today's players, like, there's so many new players on the tour now. So and with if somebody were to ask me about a whole bunch of,
why is he still talking about Yvonne Lendl so much?
Like, I had Stefan Edberg or something like that. But like,
I had Stefan Edberg's shirt, like his signature shirt. Like that was my big tournament shirt. I never won a fucking thing. I was not an accomplished tennis player, but I did have Stefan Edberg's shirt.
You still have that shirt?
You do?
No, do you? Oh yeah,
I was like 11. No, I mean, even if I did, I couldn't wear it.
Everything. In fact, Mark Stein, who's this crazy, collector of things too, and he loves tennis. He knows that I'm like obsessive about Stefan Edberg stuff. So he's always on eBay, and he sends me links all the time. Like, somebody has this Edberg jacket for like $120, and it's like the last one that exists, And I'm just like, I'm not buying some jacket that somebody wore for the last 30 years.
I always like doing this stuff because you find out things about people that you didn't know. And now I know that Ohm Youngmisuk is a Stefan Edberg stan.
And I've not seen me wear an Edberg jacket to a Lakers practice. I'm pretty sure I have.
I must have just not noticed it. As they said in Shawshank, how often do you look at a man's jacket? Like, I had no idea.
Practice, I will wear an Edberg jacket for you.
All right. God, I mean, it'd be nice if there was a practice we could all attend.
I was going to say, like, all of this stuff, and we'll by the way, we had some requests on the chat. We're going to get to tonight's Lakers game. Their first loss, I believe, in 4 or 5 games.
They're 6-3.
Like, all of this is going to be changed in ways that we can't quite anticipate, but I would be shocked if it goes back to, once the vaccines are out there, it feels like, people can actually congregate. I still think things are going to change because teams have either discovered it's easier to do it a certain way. Players have discovered they prefer it a certain way. Like, the scrums, for example, I'm not going to lie. I would love to see those go away, period.
Yeah.
Like the scrums in the locker rooms. I
think I might have told you guys this when we were, you can ask the other Laker beat writers like Goon, especially. He's, I would sit next to him or whatever, Dave. But these guys knew that I was like telling them about the pandemic and coronavirus like early. I was the whistleblower back in January and February, because I was like into like these things and I read about it and I was like, man, this thing is coming here. And I remember thinking when it was starting to like really blow up in China, and I remember thinking when we were in Staples Center for the Kobe Bryant whole ceremony, and I was thinking, somebody in this arena has COVID. I was like, I know it. And I remember like that weekend before the NBA shut down when the Lakers played the Bucks.
Yes.
And I was in the Laker locker room, and there was there's always a million people in the Laker locker room waiting for LeBron and AD, but that night there were a lot of people. And I remember that night it was really hot and warm in that locker room, and I remember thinking like, somebody definitely has COVID in this locker room. I just remember thinking that, and I was like, I don't want to be here, you know?
Oh, I mean, Brian will remember, he and I talking about this a lot, and me in particular, just being like, what the hell are we all doing? Because remember, there was that period where the players and Frank Vogel had to be kept at a certain distance from us when we asked them questions. Like we'd be going to practice and they'd be separated off from us, or they started doing these post-game things in a different room as opposed to a scrum. Yet we could congregate freely with each other. We're inside a building with probably 25,000 people if you start counting workers and stuff like that. I remember just being like, what the hell is going, like, what is the purpose of all this? Why are we doing this? This is insane.
Well, what's funny about it too is like I remember the last game they played again was a game they lost actually against Brooklyn, and it was starting to get to that point where I'm sorry, I was just looking at the comments and somebody pointed out what I would be on the.
Tell Sexter Cruz that I hated Boris Becker.
Oh, well, you can tell him. He's listening.
I think you just did.
But like, so, we're at that game and you could start to see things piling up and, I've got kids. And so we're, school, making plans for school to be postponed and all these things. And you start to see, I was like, wow, this could be the last game. I'd better go. Because it seemed like, well, this is the last time I'm going to be there. And then you realize, well, now we're off for 6 months or 3 months. I can't think of a less relevant place that I needed to be than that in that building on that night for that game. Was there anything even slightly significant that happened when they played the Nets that night that was worth me risking bringing COVID home to everyone?
For me, that was my last game too. And, having covered the Nets for a long time, I went back to see a lot of people that I knew. And after I said hello to a bunch of people catching up, and I remember I ran into Jason Kidd and Kenyon Martin pregame, and we were talking about those 2000 Nets. And then at some point, somebody was talking to me, and when you're talking to someone and like accidental spit flies, and it doesn't hit you in the eye, but you think it hit you in the eye. Have you had that feeling?
Oh yeah.
You feel like somebody spit in your eye. And I remember that happened, and I was like freaking out. And so I ended up just like, you know what? I don't need to be at this game. I left at halftime. And that game, I was supposed to go into the Nets locker room and catch up with Jacques Vaughn to say hello to him. And I did not go in. And then I ended up leaving the game, going straight to like Walgreens to get eye wash, right? And wash my eyes as soon as I got home. And then the next day, the Nets, it came out that like, the Nets had COVID. And I was thinking, like, had I gone into that locker room, who knows what would have happened? And then shortly after that, basically.
Well, you remember in 28 days later, isn't that how Brendan Gleeson got infected with the blood? Like he looked up and the blood like ended up in his eye. That was 28 days later, right? You could have been you could have been turned into a zombie.
I thought you were going to say
just got COVID.
I thought you were going to say he went inside the Nets locker room.
No.
That was in the deleted. That was in the original movie, and it didn't test well. So
they thought it was too specific.
It was very random.
All right, so let's give the people a little bit of what they want. The Lakers lose tonight, 118-109. They're now 6-3 to a Spurs team, which it should be noted is not that bad, especially when Aldridge plays. These young players that they've got have been, I think, a little better than advertised. And DeMar DeRozan, who was great last year, has been really good again this year. AD after the game, Anthony Davis, completely shit on the Lakers defense, which, by the way, he was a significant part of in terms of just the effort that they're putting out in the communication. I am not concerned. I am not going to be. I am just refusing to get concerned about much of anything with these guys for at least another month. But anything that you see that is worrisome as somebody who's seen a lot?
Look, the Lakers obviously have a little bit of, we're going to turn on this light switch when we want to play defense. At the same time, I think they're learning their new pieces, Schroeder and Montrezl Harrell and Wes Matthews. The only thing I wonder, I'm not worried about the Lakers. The only thing I worry about is come playoff time, their chemistry was so good last year, and so was their defense. And they got rid of some defensive parts for more offense. And so Trez and Schroeder, I love those moves for the Lakers, especially for the regular season when LeBron and AD may need a few nights off here or there, or COVID strikes, whatever it may be. Those guys should bring more energy and more offense and more youth and more hunger and aggression. But come playoff time, when defense is at a premium, when you need guys to be at their top level and everything is a matchup thing, Trez, look, for us, the last thing we saw of Trez in the playoffs was not good. And he had a lot going on in his life. His grandmother died, and people need to understand that his grandmother raised him and was like his best friend. And he was just grieving the entire time. He was never over. He probably should not have returned. But then matchup-wise on the floor, he had become somewhat of a liability for the Clippers because he could not cover Nikola Jokic, and he could not cover other bigs. And offensively, if he wasn't in a pick and roll situation with Lou Williams, he had to create his own shot one-on-one and take a bigger center off the dribble, and then he would score. I think with the Lakers, you have LeBron James facilitating for him, so that's going to make things a lot easier for him to score. But I wonder, come playoff time, how will that translate? Also, like Schroeder, you're technically having Schroeder replace Rondo. Schroeder is a better offensive player for sure. Rondo, though, rose to the playoffs all the time. Schroeder is a guy that when I was around him in Atlanta a little bit in the playoffs, Schroeder, part of what makes Schroeder so good is that he's so aggressive and he thinks he's really good. And he doesn't want to take a seat back at times. And I am very curious to see how that stuff will play out come playoff time. And I think LeBron and AD will probably have everybody in check like they should. They're superstars, and they'll raise their game another level. But they're just a slight thing that I want to see how that's going to play out come playoff time, because we saw what the product was last year for those Lakers and for the guys that they have. And now you wonder defensively, are they going to be missing something come playoff time?
Okay, you actually raised something I know Brian and I have talked about before, being curious about and wanting to maybe talk to someone like Mike Budenholzer. But you said that you were around Schroeder during the Atlanta days. And that was a period where Schroeder had a pretty bad reputation in terms of as a teammate, as being, very erratic on the, he didn't have a reputation as being erratic on the court. I could see that he was erratic on the court. But he had a reputation as hot-headed in the locker room, difficult to play with, prickly. A lot seemed to get rehabbed in OKC, particularly the year he was with Chris Paul. And I think he's gotten off to a good start with the Lakers. And, there's already reports of them looking to extend him, which, to some degree is practical because they gave up, draft capital for him and he's in his prime. If you could lock that up, that would be good. This might be a bit of a difficult question to answer just because of the setup with the pandemic and the separation we've had with players. But what have you noticed with Schroeder that's different, either temperamentally or approach then versus now?
I don't think Schroeder was super prickly or anything like that in Atlanta when I was around them in the playoffs. I think Schroeder wanted to start. He views himself as a starter, and Jeff Teague was starter at that time. If anybody was prickly and a little standoffish to the media at times, it was Jeff Teague sometimes on that Atlanta team. Schroeder, though, saw himself as a starter, and I think he still does, obviously. And so, I think he's good at what he does, and I think he's matured. And I think being around LeBron and AD, the hope for the Lakers is that Dennis Schroeder will see what it takes to win a championship, and that is the important thing. And that you're going to sacrifice some personal for the better good of the team, and in the end, you're going to reap the benefits. And I think the Lakers are going to hope that that's all that stuff is going to rub off on Dennis Schroeder. I think Dennis Schroeder is a good dude, and I think he just he's confident in his abilities. He views himself as a starter, and I think if he views himself that if he were on a bad team and he was the go-to guy, I'm sure he feels like he would be the guy who carries a team, But on this team, he's not going to do that.
Well, it was interesting. I mean, you saw it tonight, and one of the things that I think has carried the Lakers and been very effective for them, particularly in those first few games when AD was really taking, kind of easing into the season, which I don't know. This guy's had about a 45-minute offseason. I have no problem with anything that they're doing in terms of pacing themselves. But you see the difference in the Lakers offense when they have two more guys who are capable of scoring 18, 20 points a game with relative consistency if you give them the shots in Schroeder and Harrell. And like you say, that is such a big deal for the regular season. I think, they've shown what they can win with in the postseason. And it's basically all the same pieces that they have now. I mean, Dwight Howard and JaVale McGee, they had moments where they were important in the postseason, but they were not critical. Avery Bradley, literally, they showed they could win without him. There's not a piece.
There's one player.
There's Rondo.
Well, I was going to say, other than Danny Green, there's nobody that left the team that was a part of the rotation for the entirety of the season and the entirety of the playoffs.
Right.
Because Rondo was in and out with injuries. Avery Bradley didn't go to the bubble, and he was hurt for a lot of the season anyway. You already mentioned Dwight and JaVale. It really is Danny Green in terms of somebody that was there from start to finish with any level.
And Wes seems like Wes Matthews feels like a very natural replacement in so many ways. So I think that regular season aspect, and something Andy and I have been hitting on for a while, it's so important. And so even if those guys don't help in the same way, or Harrell can't be used quite as extensively as you would think for a guy of his profile in the playoffs, I think they're still okay.
Oh, they're definitely okay. I think here's the thing. When you look at teams now with COVID, and today was kind of a big night.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that for sure.
Michael Porter Jr., you've got some COVID scares with Seth Curry. Joel Embiid now is, going to quarantine to make sure his family's okay, just to be safe. And look, Michael Porter Jr., for example, he was supposed to come out of quarantine, of a 7-day quarantine from contact tracing yesterday and play tonight. And all of a sudden now he is not out. He is now in another quarantine for another at least 10 to 14 days due to health and safety protocols.
So, and can you explain this? Because you actually wrote this story. You wrote the story that's posted on ESPN about this. So he was contacted, and then he ended up in close contact with a different person, so as to start over again.
Well, here's the thing about the NBA that's different than the NFL. The NFL tells you who has COVID and who doesn't. But because of the Players Association in the NBA, they rather not do that because of medical, legal reasons and things like that. So they are not obligated to tell you what's happening. They just tell you that they're in health and safety protocols. But if Michael Porter Jr. is out for 10 to 14 days, I don't know. Sounds like maybe he's could have tested positive, unless he's been around somebody again. And the thing is, you're in a 7-day quarantine, and now, if it's gotten riskier, maybe they put you in a 10 to 14-day quarantine. The bottom line is that Michael Malone had told us in the preseason, hey, we don't know what's going to happen. And if you look at what's happening with NFL teams, and one guy basically has it, now all of a sudden the entire offensive line group basically has to quarantine.
Yeah.
NBA teams are not going to be able to survive 1 or 2 outbreaks in the span of 1 to 2 weeks, because literally if you lose 5 to 7 games in a row in a 72-game season, that could be your season. Michael Malone's some teams may not be able to recover from that. The Nuggets now are looking at being without Michael Porter Jr. for over 2 weeks. They've already been for 1 week.
I was going to say, they've already been struggling a lot this season. I mean, they've won their last 2, and they've actually got a pretty good point differential for a team that's 3 and 4, but they're struggling. They've been having a lot of issues. They need him back.
Yeah, Jamal Murray hasn't quite looked like the same guy we saw him in the bubble. And I think what's going to be interesting to see is Jamal Murray was so good in the bubble, and I've heard Paul George say that shooting in the bubble is so different than shooting back in an arena. Shooting in a bubble, they felt like they were on a TV set almost. And then now back in an arena, I think when you see Paul George struggled in the bubble, but he also struggled because, as he said, numerous factors. He was feeling depressed, things like that. But now he feels he's back in a routine. He's back around his loved ones. He's also back in an arena where he's used to shooting again. Jamal Murray hasn't quite looked like the way he was in the bubble. And this was something that Michael Malone had said, listen, if he's going to take that next step to be that superstar that we saw him in that first round against Donovan Mitchell and the Jazz and against the Clippers, he's got to do it every night. And so, I don't know. Jamal Murray's also been banged up a lot. He was banged up in the bubble toward the end. The Lakers saw that. He was hobbled at the end there. And it was a quick turnaround. Who knows where he is health-wise. But, I think you're going to see some guys who shot lights out in that bubble. They might not be shooting as good back in arenas again. I don't know. We're just going to have to see. It's a weird season. Everything is so weird.
Yeah, I find Michael Porter Jr. fascinating with Denver just because, he's been linked to, like, for example, James Harden. If Denver was going to pull the trigger on something like that, Michael Porter Jr. would ultimately be the biggest piece going to Houston. And so far, Denver has, by all accounts, been reluctant or unwilling to include him in anything. He's young, and I want to, make sure to be mindful of that. He seems like, by nature, somebody who could be very flighty to count on as a potential future cornerstone. And again, he's young, so I want to make sure that you don't write him off at this type of age, because I don't think that's fair. And we've seen plenty of players mature over the years.
People know.
If you told somebody 2 or 3 years into Kyle Lowry's career what he would be right now, especially as a leader, they would have told you you're insane. And one of those people would be Kyle Lowry. I mean, we've talked to him about this before. That being said, though, like when Michael Porter Jr. is the guy that Denver so far will refuse to ever give up on, there could be opportunity costs. I just think it's fascinating with him in particular.
Yeah, look, the Nuggets obviously are they love their prospects that they've gotten. They drafted very well with this whole, like, we can redshirt a guy and wait for someone who was supposed to be a top 3 pick, but due to injuries or whatever factors it was, dropped in the draft. Like R.J. Hampton, Bol, Michael Porter Jr. Michael Porter Jr., though, has also had some things where he's shown his age, like the whole coronavirus conspiracy thing that he did back in the bubble when he was on Snapchat or something like that before the bubble, where he basically thought like it was population control, and he made some comments about that, and the Nuggets had to talk to him about that.
They didn't seem pleased.
Yeah, no. And so, look, I don't know. It's an interesting thing because if the Nuggets keep struggling, and this is a season where they are going to feel pressure because they made it to the Western Conference Finals. There's no more waiting for them. Now they got to, stay at that level and take that next step. Nikola Jokic is playing out of his mind this season.
He really is.
Having a triple-double. He's incredible. You don't want to waste a year like that, But when you bring in a guy like James Harden into that mix,
I don't think it works.
It changes everything for them. Nikola Jokic now is not going to have the ball in his hands as much. I don't, it's really hard for me to say don't go after a guy who was MVP. You know what I mean? And is this unbelievable offensive talent. Like, I've even tried thinking at times, like, how would James Harden fit on the Clippers? Because, and the reason why I said that was this is before they signed Paul George long term. Because the Clippers are always a team to me, because they have Steve Ballmer with unlimited pockets, that whenever a talent like James Harden becomes available, unexpectedly available, a team like the Clippers would normally pounce, right? But they had given up all their assets for Paul George. And, of course, then they re-signed Paul George to that extension. And Paul George and Kawhi Leonard are linked together, So, but I was thinking, how would that work with James Harden on the Clipper team? And I kept thinking, like, I don't see it,
Well, here's what I want, because I heard Windhorst and Zach Lowe did this on his podcast, kind of went through the list of potential teams that could pull the trigger on James Harden, because, like you said, he's, for all the jokes and the strip clubs and this, he's James Harden. There arguably isn't a better pure scorer in the NBA. Like, you can make that argument. And, he's better. He's a better player than Michael Porter Jr. by a lot. You got to figure out the combinations. You got to figure out, but like at some point you can overthink it too. Yeah. And just be like, our talent upgrade is so high. And in theory, like so much of it honestly depends on if you're Denver, like would he sulk the entire time he's here because it's Denver? Like, at least if he gets traded to Toronto this year, gets a year at, Tampa strip clubs. So, see, look, the jokes write themselves. But like,
and you can still do that in Florida.
That's right. Ron DeSantis isn't keeping you from doing that.
You can find a strip club anywhere you go. I'm not saying I do, but I'm
like Florida, I think they're just encouraging it, openly. But like, someone at some point will do it, especially I guess if Houston lowers the price or leaves an opening of any sort. Like, how do you think this ends? Because he's not going to be in Houston all year. I just don't see it.
Well,
I mean, he could be, I guess, but
if he is still unhappy in Houston, then I don't think he would mind, going to a new place as long as it was a team that was contending. I think that's probably. I don't know for sure. I'm not in Harden's head, but I would assume that he wants to contend. But maybe he ends up liking the team that's around him with DeMarcus Cousins and John Wall, who's looked great so far. But I would think that, it looks like James Harden probably wants to be on a team where he can contend, and Denver would be one of those spots.
He's just a really difficult guy to drop into your team, like particularly in a season where it's going to be difficult to practice. Like where you're really going to have to workshop this stuff during games. And look, to some degree, it's what all these teams are doing. Frank Vogel has talked about how the first few months of the season, and Brian asked him this question, that the games are really going to be serving as a lab. But at least with the Lakers, they've got some degree of continuity, and their two best players, took roughly 15 minutes to discover chemistry. Like, James Harden is not easy to just bring into a new scenario and say, all right, everybody do their thing, and it's obvious how it's going to work. Like, the guy that fits in well with James Harden doing his thing, like the star level player, I don't know if the list is that long. I'm not saying it can't be done, but like in terms of natural fits among stars where it really doesn't change what they do, I don't think the list is that big.
Yeah, I mean, unless he goes to a place where he's friends with the guys already, like Kevin Durant, maybe, and the Nets. But even then, you wonder, okay, there's one ball to go around: Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, and James Harden. How is that going to work out? Somebody's going to be third fiddle. You know what I mean? And we know that Kyrie doesn't like that. Kyrie wants to be kind of the dude at the end. Kevin Durant is Kevin Durant. He's an all-time player. And James Harden, is he going to go back to being third fiddle? I don't see that. But it would be incredibly fun to watch, though, if the Nets somehow got James Harden, because I would love to watch that. I feel like it would just be like you would have to tune in every night.
Yeah, it's so hard to figure. Because, like, he's one of these guys that has become like, I think another question becomes, is he willing to play differently? I mean, that's so much of this is it's all predicated on the idea that when Harden lands in your city, he's going to insist on all the time playing like he does in Houston, and he has in Houston for years now. But that's not necessarily guaranteed. I mean, if he goes to Brooklyn and plays with his buddies like he says he wants to, he can't play in the same way. Anywhere he goes, he's going to have to play differently. The question is, does he get that? And is he? Guys will say all the time, I'm willing to do whatever. And then when you get there, it's not so easy. LeBron found that out his first year. We know it's a rebuilding year and all that kind of stuff. Kobe went through this all the time too. When you actually have to do that and be patient, whatever, it's not easy. Is he capable of changing the way that he plays?
I think when you're the guy that's traded to another team that has other stars, then you're willing to kind of basically try to fit in. We've never seen like Michael Jordan traded in his prime or anything like that. But like, I think in today's era, probably like James Harden would be looking to fit in a situation like that and then see how it goes the following season. You're right. Like LeBron, when he landed with the Lakers, wasn't a trade, but still it was different for him that first year. So like, I think he'd probably be willing to accept the situation depending on where he went. Like if he went to Brooklyn.
Okay, follow up to that, based on what you were just saying, because I think there's a lot of truth there.
Yeah.
Does he need to go somewhere where the best player, he doesn't, he goes to Brooklyn and he sees Kyrie and KD as equals. KD's an MVP. He's a champion. Kyrie's won a title. Nikola Jokic, does he feel like he's got to fit in with Nikola Jokic if he shows up in Denver? Does he feel like he's got to fit in with Jason Tatum if he's traded to Boston? Like if he shows up and he thinks he's the best player there.
Okay, here's actually a
dynamic too.
Here's a perfect test case for what Brian's talking about. Say he gets traded to Portland with Damian Lillard.
With Dame.
Because like Harden has more accomplishments, I guess, on his resume, but Portland, that's Damian Lillard's team. It's Damian Lillard's city, and you're not going to intimidate that guy. He is the culture.
In my mind, that would kind of be a little bit like a Miami situation when LeBron got to D Wade's team. And Wade basically was like, okay, look, I know this is my team and this is my franchise, but you're the star, right? But Dame is so good. It's a little easier for Dwayne Wade to do that, having won a championship already, where Damian Lillard hasn't, And so it's an interesting question of how that would play out. It's fascinating.
Something occurred to me watching the Laker game tonight, Ohm, that I wanted to ask you about. And I also wanted to, at some point before we get to the game, I wanted to talk a little bit about the piece you wrote with Kawhi Leonard now more comfortable playing in back-to-backs. But with the Lakers...
And also people want to see your shoes.
Yes, people do want to see your shoes. So we'll get to the Laker question right now. That this season, I think, could be a really interesting question of, like, how much can you actually build habits, like good habits, while also coasting at times? Because we've seen that the Lakers are actually capable of turning it on a lot over the course of a quarter. And they're so talented. They really are such a good team. And their top two players are arguably the two best players in the league on the same team. So they're able to crank it up pretty quickly. And in those moments, you could argue that they are building championship habits. But at the same time, they will spend a lot of time, I think, in certain ways, out of necessity, coasting through stuff. And I don't necessarily blame them for doing it, but I wonder how much of a cost there is to doing that, or if you have a foundation like they have, can you actually do both?
I think you can do both because they've won a championship and they just won the championship. If it was a situation where it was like the Clippers, for example, and they're coming off basically an epic meltdown, I think that's why you see Kawhi Leonard, and by all accounts from Ty Lue's like, Kawhi Leonard is showing up to practice, first guy. He's one of the last guys to leave. He's now playing in back-to-back games. He's trying to lead by example. And I think he has to probably feel the need to not coast in practice based off of what happened last year and how the Clippers didn't have a lead.
That was part of what I was going to ask you about.
It needs to be that guy, right? This is different, though, for the Lakers. You've got one of the all-time leaders in LeBron James. Anthony Davis now is understanding what it takes, having won a championship, his first championship, to be that guy. He's learning from LeBron firsthand. And I think that transition is happening where LeBron James is going to pass the baton to him. Yes, LeBron has already said he's doing that, but I'm just saying it's still going to be a transition. It still takes time. I think those two guys, because they just went through it, they can still coast a little bit in games, maybe not have to practice all the time. I don't know for sure what they're doing in practices, but the guys have their respect. They have their guys' respect because they just went through the fire and won a championship and know what they can do in probably one of the hardest environments that a champion's ever going to have to go through.
I don't know what the alternative is. Like this is not one of these things where like the Clippers made calculated choices last year about how to handle the regular season. The Lakers made similarly calculated choices about how they wanted to do it. It's hard to know what would have happened had the pandemic not come, because obviously that creates circumstances that nobody could have possibly anticipated. And the Clippers, I think fair to say, didn't handle the bubble as well as the Lakers. But, just whatever. Last year, the Lakers' decisions turned out to be good. The Clippers' decisions turned out to be bad, circumstances notwithstanding. This year, I don't understand. I don't know what else the Lakers can do other than this, which is preserve LeBron as much as they can, preserve AD as much as they can, and with 40 games or so left in the season, put the pedal down and really try to round into form. I don't know what the alternative could possibly be.
I mean, 40 games. I mean, you're actually talking about maybe like 3 weeks from now in a shortened season. That's actually not that much
shorter. But yeah, you're right. But like, the last 35 or 40 games, because it doesn't matter if they're a 1 seed, a 3 seed, or a 4 seed, especially because there probably aren't going to be fans in most buildings in the spring. I mean, I doubt.
Listen, honestly, I think Laker fans need to temper their expectations for the regular season and just hope that this team not only gets through the regular season healthy, but avoids COVID. Because I feel like I don't know, I feel like you're starting to see these little explosions here and there on different teams. The NBA has not experienced the full explosion like the NFL has and some of these other sports. And so, the Lakers so far, they're doing good. You know what I mean? And you just don't want to see like a bunch of players catch COVID and all of a sudden multiple players are out or anything like that. I just feel like get the Lakers to the playoffs safely. I don't care what their seed is going to be. You know what I mean? I think they're going to be fine. You can't say that for every other Western Conference team, though.
Yeah, I mean, again, I have not been freaking out about this for a reason, or wondering where's the intensity. I don't necessarily even want to see them playing intense every single game over the course of 48 minutes. I don't think it would actually be that smart of them. I mean, if anything, at times I'm just marveling at the way LeBron can just decide, okay, I'm in it now. Like, I am going to start playing like LeBron James. And the way he can summon that on a dime is pretty amazing. I mean, like, that in and of itself is just sort of this game within the game.
Andy, I mean, you guys saw it today, that the moments he had in the first half, particularly against San Antonio night, where he controlled the game. He got anywhere he wanted, whenever he wanted. And like, he knows he can still do that. And I'm cool.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing what he's able to do at his age, And I remember when he got hurt in Golden State that first year. He was here with Lonzo and Brandon Ingram and all those guys, and thinking like, holy cow, I've never seen LeBron get hurt and be out for a long time, And, to go from that to where he is now, it's like, that was just like a hiccup for him. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, he's back to being LeBron that he was in Cleveland, playing the Golden State Warriors in the finals every year.
Well, I mean, look, I'll be the first to admit, I had concerns about the ramifications with his health, because it was the first real injury we'd ever seen with LeBron. And honestly, I had concerns just about his mileage before the season even began, much less before he got hurt, just because at some point, even with LeBron, every athlete's body just stops cooperating. And we're not seeing it yet with LeBron, and it looks like it's going to be a ways off. But there will be a point when it happens. Yeah. But seeing LeBron go through that groin,
we might all be dead, but it'll happen at some point.
I mean, it's going to be like 3 seasons after Bronny retires. But at some point, LeBron's body will just say, I can't do this anymore. But like, seeing LeBron appear vulnerable, by LeBron James standards, was in and of itself jarring. And it's just a reminder of everything that he's done. And like, the way he used to be talked about as a cyborg, the before and what we're seeing now really reinforces why. It's stunning. It's unprecedented what he's doing.
I think even his mentality too, he seems more patient. Like, he likes his team. He likes where he's at. He just loves where he's at in his life right now. And that first year with the young Lakers, it's funny because we got this project that's coming out tomorrow on Lonzo and LaMelo facing each other for the first time.
Yes.
I had to go back into the time capsule to go back to the Ball era and do that part of the Lonzo part. And I just remember going through all the dates and everything and just thinking, like, remembering how LeBron was like, man, this is going to test my patience. He never said that, but you could tell. You could tell that LeBron was looking at these guys and thinking, like, these guys are 2-3 years away. I don't have that time to wait for them. You know what I mean? and then the basically the trade rumors tearing that locker room apart and really hanging over all those young kids. But now you look at LeBron and you just, you still expect sometimes he's going to shoot a glare at one of his teammates after making a bad play or anything like that. But it hasn't been as much as, you might get used to from LeBron in the past. I just think he likes where he's at.
I think that's a great point, because like when you start tonight he was talking about, the events of yesterday. If you're on Twitter, you can see it and all, and talking about the president, and it's weird to talk about him like it's like a younger person, but he is, he's 10 years younger than I am, 9 years younger than I am, and about 26 younger than Andy. And so he really is in a place where he's sort of fully realized in almost, he's at the peak of so many things at one time, between, still very much at the peak and in control of his basketball abilities. He's ascended as a creative person. He's ascended as a legitimate, like truly influential figure in social issues and social policy, and he's building schools and creating programs. And I forget even the last thing that he said he was doing. And then, he's driving the vote in Georgia and all this other stuff. Like I'd feel good about where I am too. Like it's remarkable.
I'm not saying that LeBron was not comfortable in his skin, when he was with Cleveland making the finals and all that stuff. But where he's at in his life right now, all the things you just mentioned, he's like in his prime.
Yes,
like
exactly.
I'm not talking about like his basketball, everything, family, Hollywood with the movies, what he's doing, basically giving back to the kids in his hometown, to like, you know what? I think I'm going to buy the Atlanta Dream. You know what I mean? Like everything he's got going on, and he's the number one guy in sports that we look to now as a player for social justice issues and things like that. His voice resonates. LeBron's at a place in his life right now where he's just so comfortable with, and everything is just like perfect around him.
By the way, it would be so great if he bought the Atlanta Dream, not just because I think it would be great for LeBron. And I think, if anybody understands, what it takes for teams to be successful, it would be him. But it would mean that LeBron had a role in replacing Kelly Loeffler twice. First in getting her out of office, and then getting her out of the WNBA. That would be amazing, because that woman has no business being a part of either one, the WNBA or government. She just is a really loathsome person.
At least we've taken care of one of those things, and
yes,
now
it would be pretty awesome if LeBron was involved in both. Before we get to the game,
let me say this to finish it. The one thing that's remarkable about this is for a professional athlete to be able to overlap all that stuff in terms of being in the prime of their life as a person and still be able to do that as an athlete is exceedingly rare, because those timelines as human beings, very rarely in the prime of everything about yourself, intellectually, spiritual, whatever it might be, family life, in your 30s. Yeah. Really your late 30s, and where you can still be at your prime as a basketball player. You're usually done with one before you start the other, which is why so many athletes struggle in a post-career thing. And that's all I have to say about that. Andy, go ahead.
But here's the thing, BK, like all the things you mentioned, we haven't even mentioned everything he's doing. It's overwhelming just to hear that. Like my day, like, man, if I had to handle all that stuff, and yes, he has his helpers who help him and all that stuff, but man, all the things he's got going on is like so overwhelming to me, but he handles it. And I think also the other thing about him being at a great place in his life, the people around him that he loves the most are in a great place in their life. Maverick, Rich Paul, you know what I mean? He's seen all these guys succeed, and I think that also adds to where he's at and why everything is clicking right now.
Yeah, it's a really great story. I mean, all those guys coming up together, helping each other out, and just really forming this amazing bond as they've all just become incredibly successful. I mean, they're all clearly beyond being talented. They're all very smart, and that's it's really cool to see that type of intelligence with everything else rise to the top. So before we get to the game, there's been some request, Ohm, to see the sneakers in the background.
Okay. So do you need me to move?
Well, I mean, can you bring out a few for some
close-up best pair? What's the best thing you got behind you?
This one is the cool grays. They're a little beat up, but this is a pair that a lot of people like. In fact, the other day I was actually looking to see how much. I don't know. I just stumbled down like a Jordan rabbit hole. I saw. I think these shoes were like worth like over $800 or something like that.
Whoa,
really?
Um,
And you're touching them without gloves?
So those are dirty and worn. They're like, I wouldn't even be able to get like, I don't know. I'd be surprised if somebody paid $200 for them. This is obviously a great pair. This is the Breads. I do have the Legend Blues.
Oh, look at this.
I have no idea what that means.
I have no idea either. Like, I thought the Legend Blues was like a blues album.
What's that?
I believe these are like the Legend Blues he's talking about.
Okay. They're not blue.
Casey, can you confirm? Is that what you're asking about? Because Brian and I have no idea.
The thing is, like, I don't know. I collect these 11s. I just, like anything else, I'm a kid. And I wanted these growing up. And now that, I have the means, I go about and I just go and collect all the favorite things that I love,
You heard it here, guys.
I have like
He's got LeBron money.
No, I don't have LeBron money. That's the other thing too. I was telling somebody about this the other day. A friend of mine called me up and was like, "Hey, I'm just starting to get into sneakers. Can you give me like the hookups that you have to get these?" And I was like, honestly, I go through the same thing everybody else does. I go on the sneakers app, or back in the day when Foot Locker would have a raffle, you go to the mall, you go get a ticket on like Tuesday, you find out by Friday if you got them, and then Saturday you go and you get in line, or you get in line on Saturday and try to get them. I think it's the Asian shopper in me. I don't want to pay extra for something that I think I know I can get at retail. And if I don't get it at retail, I think it's like the competitive side of me. I just refuse to pay $100 more for something that was like for example, there is this Nike Dunks that were in Michigan State colors. They were called Spartan Dunks. They were like $120 or something like that retail. I didn't get them. I don't know how. They just sold out that day. I was incredibly pissed off. Those shoes now are like $290 or something like that online. I refuse to pay that for those shoes. And I want them bad, but I won't pay that money for them.
All right, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna do a GoFundMe, so Owen can get his Sparties. I What's funny is like I love shoes. Like if I were rich, I would have tons of shoes. I love shoes. I love sneakers. I don't know anything though about like shoe culture. I just know I like that pair. I like and I know nothing about basketball shoes, in part because I feel like you have to, at least at one point in your life, been good at basketball to wear basketball shoes. Like that is my position on high top basketball sneakers, particularly.
The thing is, like now, I have a ton of dress shoes. I don't wear them anymore because I just wear basketball shoes or sneakers to games. The older I've gotten, all I want to do is just be comfortable. And that's it. And look, they do have dress shoes that are Cole Haans or like Nike technology. They're super comfortable. But now I'm just going to wear sneakers for the rest of my life, I think, unless I am on TV and they're showing a full shot of us and I have to wear dress shoes.
A long time ago, I got brought in to do what I thought was going to be a freelance assignment from this PR person to cover this opening of a Nike town somewhere in Beverly Hills. And like Michael Cooper, Cynthia Cooper, late Jack Haley, and Scoop Jackson were all going to be a part of this thing. And they were all going to be speaking. And I thought I was just going to be writing about this event. It was like a PR type thing. And that was going to be the end of it. Turns out they thought I was going to be part of the panel. Oh. So all of a sudden I'm on this panel with, again, Michael Cooper, Cynthia Cooper, Jack Haley, all professional athletes, Scoop Jackson, like one of the premier sneaker culture guys in this country, has written books about this stuff. And me, who knows absolutely.
Like, you think I don't know, Andy, do you own a pair of basketball shoes?
Yes, I do.
Yes, I do, because of the games we played at ESPN, the celebrity games. We gave us the shoes for free.
Yes, that is how I got every single one of them. I've got, I think, 2 pairs, and it's from that.
You have never bought a pair of basketball shoes to go play basketball in, have you?
No. I mean, I've owned a few pairs of high tops before, but it's just purely been for the fashion of it. I've honestly, I don't know how much this is considered hardcore sneaker culture or not. I've always just liked Chuck Taylors. Like I love Chuck Taylors. I love Converses. Like those have always been my favorites, but more on the fashion side of it or just the look of it.
As opposed to performance.
Right, exactly. But I ended up on this fucking panel. I'm like, what the hell am I supposed to be saying? All of a sudden, they end up opening up the floor and people started asking me something. I'm like, I don't know. Like every single thing, like I tried to flip it over to Michael or Cynthia or Cooper or something like that. I'm like, the hell am I doing up on this thing? And like the woman who informed me of this, I was like, I have no business being up there. She's like, well, would you mind doing it anyway? I'm like,
well,
it's too late now.
They clearly didn't realize you were a single A coach.
That's right.
Exactly. All right. So obviously, people, you're seeing this right now. Ohm's Twitter handle, the notorious OHM, obviously homage to the notorious BIG. Biggie, who I know Ohm is a big fan of. And I hope I have this correct. The last time you were on with us, or at least one of the times you were on with us, we did trivia as a game about Biggie. Am I remembering this correctly? Yes. Okay, good. Obviously, one of the people associated with Biggie for reasons both good and tragic, Tupac Shakur. So tonight we are going to play a game of trivia about Tupac Shakur. And I purposely did these questions in a way that Brian could actually keep up. It's not actually going to be about the music purely, because otherwise Brian would get smoked. And it would be pretty
much fun as that would be. It just wouldn't be entertaining.
Right. It would not be a particularly good game. This is stuff that I think Brian has a reasonably good chance of keeping up with Ohm. So we begin. While Tupac Shakur was Tupac's legal name, it was not his original name. His original name was Lasan Parrish Crooks. How old was he when his mother renamed him? 1 month old, 3 months old, 6 months old, or a year old? Brian goes first.
Interesting. His mother renamed him. I'm going to go 6 months old.
Ohm.
I will go with, I'm going to say a year.
He was a year old when his mother changed his name. Next question.
I did not know that.
Tupac attended the Baltimore School for the Arts as a teenager, which exposed him to a wide variety of artistic forms, which he apparently devoured all of them, including ballet. Which famous ballet did he perform in? Don Quixote, Sleeping Beauty, The Nutcracker, or Swan Lake? Ohm goes first.
I'm going to say, I'll say The Nutcracker.
Brian.
I will say Swan Lake.
It was The Nutcracker. Ohm up 2-0. He played the Mouse King in the Nutcracker. So he really
Jada Pinkett Smith became lifelong friends.
He did become lifelong friends.
Not in Greece, Sector Cruise.
Which classic play did Tupac perform in at the famous Apollo Theater? A Raisin in the Sun, Fences, Joe Turner's Come and Gone, A Soldier's Play. Brian goes first.
I'll say Fences. It's an outstanding piece of work.
Yes, it is. All of these plays are very good.
I'll say Come and Gone.
No, it was A Raisin in the Sun. He performed at the Apollo Theater, I believe, as a teenager, or maybe early 20s at the latest, in A Raisin in the Sun. Ohm still up 2-0. As mentioned before, Tupac is an alum of the Baltimore School of the Arts. Which of these actors is not a fellow alum? 3 are, 1 is not. Josh Charles, Jada Pinkett Smith, Monique, or Lawrence Gilliard Jr., D'Angelo Barksdale from The Wire. Ohm goes first.
I'm going to say Monique.
Brian.
I'm going to say the guy from The Wire. That's 2 on the nose.
No, it is actually Monique. Ohm up 3-0. She is from Baltimore, but she's the only one that did not go to the Baltimore School of the Arts. Did end up winning an Oscar, though. So
turning into a route. Okay.
This is turning into a route.
So far.
2, the number 2, Pac is Tupac's best-known stage name, I guess other than maybe Machiavelli, but it is not his first stage name. Which name did Tupac first perform under?
Pac.
Well played. MC Baltimore.
I get a half point for that.
Okay, Brian has half a point. Ohm is up 3-0.
Half.
MC Baltimore, MC New York, MCM County for Marin County, where Tupac lived for a few years as a teenager, or MC Peru, which is a nod to the heritage of the name Tupac Amaru, Amaru being his middle name. Brian goes first. MC Baltimore.
I think the last one about
MC,
Peru.
MC Peru?
That's the best one of them.
I would say MC Peru too.
Oh, it's MC New York. Remember, he did live in New York for a while. He was MC New York as his first stage name. Ohm's still up 3-1/2. Tupac's debut on wax, as the kids would say back in the day, came as a guest rapper with Digital Underground, the song Same Song. It was on the soundtrack of this not terribly successful 1991 comedy, Hudson Hawk with Bruce Willis, Oscar with Sylvester Stallone, Nothing But Trouble with John Candy, Dan Aykroyd, Chevy Chase, and Demi Moore, or Suburban Commando with Hulk Hogan. Ohm goes first.
It's a movie about a man who lives in the suburbs who doesn't wear underwear.
You don't get half a point for that.
I get a third of a point for that.
No, you do not. That's too much math.
Wait, so which one did you pick?
Ohm, it's either Hudson Hawk, Oscar with Sylvester Stallone, Nothing But Trouble, or Suburban Commando.
I'm gonna go Nothing But Trouble.
Brian.
I need to catch up. I'll go with the first one.
Hudson Hawk?
No, it wasn't in Hudson Hawk. Well, that really didn't do well. I'll say Hudson Hawk.
Oh, you should have tried to catch up by going with the right answer. Nothing But Trouble. Ohm.
I don't catch up because he guessed Nothing But Trouble.
Ohm with up 4-1/2. This is astonishing.
I'm an East Coast guy. I am not into West Coast rap, although Tupac is from the East Coast originally.
Which female artist did Tupac cite as one of his biggest musical influences? Carly Simon, Kate Bush, Stevie Nicks, or Madonna? Ohm goes first. Carly Simon, Kate Bush, Stevie Nicks, or Madonna?
I'm going to say Madonna.
Brian.
I feel like that's the correct answer, and I don't want to be stuck on a half, so I am going to say Madonna.
No, it's Kate Bush.
Kate Bush.
Kate Bush was one of his biggest musical influence. She, by the way, is really, really talented. Ohm's still up 4-1/2. A couple more to go, Brian, for the slaughter ends. Which rapper auditioned for the role of Bishop, which eventually went to Bishop in the movie Juice, which eventually went to Tupac? Tretch from Naughty by Nature, Snoop, Master P, or Sticky Fingers from Onyx? Tretch, Snoop, Master P, Sticky Fingers. Brian goes first.
What was the question? I don't remember.
Which rapper auditioned for the role of Bishop in Juice, which eventually went to Tupac?
Right. I'll say Tretch.
I'm going with Sticky Fingers.
Brian, all of a sudden coming back.
See, I've been waiting for a game that's all about Tretch. Tretch is my guy.
Tretch actually did some acting. Tretch
is totally my guy. So, like, I'm happy we went there.
Tupac actually went to the audition with a friend of his, another rapper who was auditioning. He asked if he could read. He was given 15 minutes to prepare, and then he ended up getting the role. In an interview in the 90s, which 90s music icon did Tupac say he was planning to open a restaurant with? Courtney Love, Alanis Morissette, Sheryl Crow, or Gwen Stefani? Ohm goes first.
I'm going to say Courtney Love.
Brian.
I'll say Gwen Stefani, and they would have called it Bananas.
Okay, you get a half a point for that, but you are wrong. It's actually Alanis Morissette. According to Tupac, he, Snoop, Suge Knight, and Alanis Morissette were going to open up a restaurant together, which I thought was pretty crazy. According to him, apparently true. So Ohm up 4-2, but as luck would have it for Brian, this last one is worth 3 points. So, Brian, you have an opportunity. Amazing to get back in this. When Tupac was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which ballot was he? First ballot, second ballot, third ballot. He's actually not in yet because he's not yet eligible. First ballot, second ballot, third ballot, not yet in. Ohm goes first.
Whoa. God, I should know this. I watched that Hall of Fame show every now and then. I'm gonna go first ballot.
Brian.
They never let the hip hop guys in on the first ballot. I'll say second.
Congratulations on your destruction of Brian. Tupac was a first ballot.
I mean, he should be. I'm not arguing the choice, and I needed to pick a different number, but like that's good. I'm glad they got it right.
What is the record for all-time route in these quizzes on your show?
Oh, you're not even close.
No,
really?
No.
This was good. Don't get me wrong. Winning 7-2 is pretty impressive.
It's like winning the finals in 5. Actually, you won pretty decisively, but sometimes people win in 4.
One of the biggest routes ever, and she's still angry about this, was Sirat Sohai. The topic was Canada, and I destroyed her. I destroyed her.
Game of Canadian trivia.
I destroyed her.
By the way, I think I wrote it. Is it stretch or tretch?
It's tretch.
Okay. All right. Now they're making because I couldn't tell because somebody said you left a letter off on the chat board because I admitted I don't know what a tretch is. I don't know who that is.
Do the last quiz. I know there was some biggie, but did we do a Freddie Prinze Jr. quiz too?
Yes, we did. We also did because I think this is your third time on. And yes, we did do. I think. Yes, we did do. Because
by the way, your watch now is on the way. We send everybody who shows up on the show 3 times gets a watch.
We should do a quiz on like the Wonder Years or something like that.
Oh,
ooh,
okay.
Brian would feel confident with that.
I feel confident with that.
I have no idea what the Wonder Years is.
If you want to do my so-called life.
Oh, I never watched that show.
Okay. First weekend I moved to LA, sat on the beanbag. Andy and I shared an apartment at that point. I had nowhere to go, didn't know what to do. Whatever. So I just sat in the beanbag, watched an entire my so-called life marathon. So
it's all been uphill from there. That was as good as it got.
It was going to get better, but oh well. Me and Jordan Catalano.
Before we go, please explain to people if they didn't see it why we decided to do Freddie Prinze Jr. Trivia.
And as I've told Freddie Prinze Jr. himself, I had the same haircut for years. Actually was a basketball player at Michigan State. This guy named Matt Stegna, who I thought was like one of the baddest white boys in college basketball at the time. He actually claimed to fame before he got drafted by the Bulls when Jordan and Pippen were there, was that he in high school was one of the most highly recruited players the same year as Alonzo Mourning. And he broke the backboard in Michigan in a high school game. And so at Michigan State, when I got there, he was about a junior or senior. And he had this haircut where it wasn't quite Christian Laettner, but it was like short on the sides, but then he had his hair combed to the side. And there was like a little ledge and it like flopped over. and I went to like the barber and I was like, you know what? I want my haircut just like that dude. And I had that like throughout college. But then once I got out of college, I was like, I got to change my hair. And so I remember thinking, I was like, I'm just going to pattern my hair after Freddie Prinze Jr., which was like this like spiky, messy look at the top. And I've kept it that way ever since.
I remember you and we did a radio show for 710 with Freddie, and you were so excited by this.
My friends know this to this day because they used to always be like, yeah, I got the Freddie Prinze Jr. look. I'm just going to live with that forever.
I have to be honest. The first time I met you, I was like, is that No, it's not. But god damn, if it doesn't look like him.
I don't know if you guys noticed, but in Thailand, I'm considered like the Thai Freddie Prinze Jr.
He's awesome, by the way, too. Freddie's a really good guy. He's a super cool dude and was very flattered by your hair homage.
Your homage to his hair.
And the other thing, too, is like he knows his sports. He knows everything. He's
yes,
good.
He does.
He's good at like D&D. He's good at board games, acting, and
cooking.
His sports.
Yeah,
very well. I mean, honestly, there are certain people who you only get one shot at this. Some people do it better than others, and kudos to Freddie. Sort of nailed it.
No matter what he picks up, he's just good at it. You know,
yeah.
They're just good at any sport that they pick up.
His big gig now is voice work, which is like I mean, if you want to be a multi-gajillionaire, I guess not. maybe it's not the right thing. But if you just want like a really comfortable, like good life where you do so you do interesting stuff, it's acting. You're all, and he does Freddie Youngmisuk Jr. Like that is brilliant stuff that he gets. I mean, like the guy's got it dialed in, and he and like Billy Mack are the people that I'm most jealous of in the world.
Yeah, he's the voice on Star Wars Rebels.
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah,
which we're big Star Wars fans, obviously.
No,
So,
this was a very big day for Ohm. that was maybe Ohm's best professional day when he got to work with Freddie. It was very exciting for him. Dude, it was great seeing you, man. This was fun. We really appreciate you being here.
We didn't even get into Mandalorian.
You know what? I have not seen any of this season. So Brian has. I know.
I have. We like to watch it with the kids. I started off by basically because I missed a lot of the first season. I've sort of been catching up. I've seen the entire second season and only parts of the first. But what my favorite thing to do was just walk into the room, and the kids were partially because I used to watch it on Fridays when I'd be doing this. But I would walk into the room and I would just look at whoever was on the screen, and I would just be like, "Hey, is that Baby Yoda?" And that would annoy them. So, but once I actually started watching, the second season, I really like it. I think it's great. And I forgot who made the joke, but it's true. Like we have an entire generation of kids now who are going to grow up looking at Yoda and calling him adult Grogu.
Yeah, we can't do any spoilers for you, but you do have to watch.
No,
the show.
I'm sorry. The statute of limitations on that has expired.
No, you cannot spoil things.
Are you telling me that people don't know that Baby Yoda has a name now?
Well, I don't know. If you've never watched the show, you wouldn't know.
I even knew that. I have not watched.
If you've been on the internet, yeah, yes.
Valley has a very big spoiler. So
no, okay, but
I'm not doing that part. I'm not. No, I didn't do that, and I didn't but I did. I had to email. Well, I know I texted about this was Harrison Fagan. Who and everybody knows, a friend of the show and also a great writer at Silver Screen and Roll, and their managing editor, I believe. And I asked him because I was like, wait a minute, Boba Fett got eaten by and this is not a spoiler because the movie came out like 40 years ago. There you go. Boba Fett got eaten by the Sarlacc in Return of the Jedi. I watched it happen. How did he get out? And then I was like, did I miss something? Was there something that they said at the beginning of the season that I missed? Like, what's going on here? Because again, everybody knows Boba Fett shows up in The Mandalorian. And he's like, no, it's just, I mean, it's part of the lore if you like read the books and see the cartoons and whatever, but you didn't miss anything.
The books basically in between say there's, Boba Fett survives. He fights his way out, basically. But of course, it depends on which way you go. Do you believe in the books, connecting the dots from after the movies and things like that?
And presumably it would be because his armor was strong enough to stop the digestive juices of the Sarlacc, which, as we learned, digests things over 1,000 years. So you do have some time if you can figure it out.
Yes, and so he fought his way out, being the most notorious bounty hunter in the galaxy. You reminded me something about you saying, "Oh, well, I don't think this is a spoiler because Return of the Jedi came out in 1983." Do you remember when they redid the Star Wars movies? They added like some scenes of them and released them in the theaters in like the 90s. So I went to see Empire Strikes Back when that came out again at Mann's Chinese Theater. I just happened to be visiting LA, and we were like, "Let's go see it at Mann's Chinese Theater." And when Darth Vader tells Luke that he's his father.
Whoa! Oh, spoilers!
Darth Vader literally says, "I am your father." Somebody in the theater just goes, "What? What?"
And I didn't. You didn't know at the time you were seeing a movie with Michael Thompson.
And of course, that was like in the 90s. That was like basically a decade after it actually came out.
Our grandpa Adolf. The last movie he ever saw in the theater was Star Wars.
Really?
Yeah.
That's like the first movie I ever saw.
1977 or whatever it was. 79? 77, yeah.
He was not a movie buff. It's safe to say.
I guess he didn't like it. He's like, I'm never going back.
Very confusing movie. That was like your last movie you ever saw. You probably were just like, what the hell is going on?
He was a very nice man. He was not a Star Wars type. Yeah, that was
Our
not the right.
mom, for that matter, our mom, I remember this very distinctly, walked out of Lord of the Rings. And do you know what her review was? It just couldn't deal with all those hobbits.
Wait, did she walk out early or in the middle or toward the
In the
end?
middle. She just got up and walked out.
It's a long movie. It's like
It is a long one. I don't think she realized how long she was going to be by herself.
We went to see this as a family, and we kept saying to her over and over, "You don't want to see this. You're going to hate it. Let's pick a different movie." She wanted to see it because it's a big event movie at the time, and our mom loves movies. Like, she goes and sees everything, and she insisted she wanted to watch this movie. And the whole time we're like, "You're going to hate this," and we could see, like, within 10 minutes of this movie, this look washes over her face where it's like, I've made a massive mistake.
My mom actually loves going to the movies, and if you invite her to any movie, it doesn't matter what it is, she'll go. And if you just give her a big bucket of popcorn, which she will finish before the previews are over, and she's like
Wow.
4'9". Okay? She's like,
Wow.
and I'll look at her and be like, God, I mean, so that you actually have to go get the refill for her. But she'll sit through any movie and watch any movie. Love every movie.
Damn, just have
I
to
hope,
supply her
I
some
hope they
popcorn.
open the theaters back up for her.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I'm a big movie goer. I love going to movie theaters, and I will go to even a C-rated, D-rated movie just because I love going to the theater and escaping for 3 hours and watching a movie in the dark and eating popcorn. And I've thought about this. Like, my brother is kind of he works used to work with Fox and now is at Disney on the movie side. And I've asked him, I'm like, because I'm so like, I'm a member of all these movie theaters and things like that. I'm like, are we ever going to have movie theater popcorn? Like, is that done? And he's like, oh yeah. He's like, you're going to get the movie theater popcorn that's in the bag and then they pour it out for you, not the kind that they make inside the little, and that's the whole thing. Like, when I go get my popcorn, I'm very particular about it. Like, I want it fresh. I want to get it. And I want where I can put my own butter on it. You know what I mean? Like I won't go to a theater if I know I can't do it myself. Like,
I picture you going to the theater and like you're still like, Mr. Youngmisuk is here. Like, escort him to his popcorn machine.
Yeah.
We've got your popcorn fresh, sir.
I'd like to order off the menu.
One of the things that COVID has done a lot of awful things, and that's one thing that I'm just like, I don't think that's coming back. There's
so much that's not coming back. Like, if you liked buffets, I hope you have a good memory of them because they ain't coming back.
I did. I mean, like, Vegas, they still do have some of the buffets right now. I think. I don't know how. I think it's got to be now, like, where they give you the food and they put it on. You tell them, right?
Sure, but I mean, I don't consider that a buffet, like a self-serve buffet. Yeah. That ain't coming back anytime soon, if at all. That is not going to be making a comeback. If you bought stock in buffets, dump them now, man.
It's rare. Yes. Yeah. Well, I even had this so at the Cinemark in Playa Vista near where I live, like, they had like basically kettle corn and regular popcorn, and I would tell them I want kettle corn at the bottom half and regular popcorn at the top. Like, God,
you fucking prima donna. This is some high school sophomore making $4 an hour, and you're ordering them around like on the ratios of your popcorn. You asshole. Jeez.
You know what? They know I'm not the only one like that because clearly they're okay with it. Like, there are clearly other people that are way worse than me.
Well, they probably just recognize it's ESPN's Ohm Youngmisuk. He could buy and sell me 10 times over. Have you seen his sneaker?
Seen his shoe collection?
I autographed a popcorn bucket for them.
He has means. He could just take my job for the fun of it.
He could have all of us killed.
And they were like, and so like now I've watched more TV shows than ever before because I can't go to the movie theater, right? And so like now I've gotten into like all this stuff on Netflix or whatever, but it's just not the same. Like doing microwave popcorn, and sure, I should probably go get like a real popcorn machine. But to me, it's just never going to be the same. It never will.
No, life is going to be very different once all of this mercifully comes to a conclusion. It's going to be very, very different. But I do look forward to what that looks like because for sure, it's got to end soon, dude.
I touch the soft serve ice cream machine after you guys use it.
In hindsight, I should have been doing this. I always just poured it into my mouth directly. because I didn't want to use up a cone. I thought I was being environmentally sensitive. Plastic lives forever in a landfill, and I won't do that anymore.
We're definitely not going to have that little buffet line at this.
Again,
2 years from now, that could be back.
Maybe. I don't know. I think they're just going to figure out the media.
I'm going to fill my ice cream directly into my mask.
I think
they're just going to put my mask back on, and it's like a trough at that point. Like, that's honestly not a bad deal.
You know, one thing I really also do miss because of the pandemic is miss seeing people at Staples, the familiar faces.
Oh, yeah.
But AB is the guy who basically ran the media center, and I hope he's all right. I haven't seen him since basically that Nets game, and I think about him all the time. I think about all the people at Staples that we see.
Yeah, those are the people. Yeah,
they're awesome. I mean, you get to know a lot of these guys just on a familial, hey, how you doing? Recognize each other. It really sucks, and like you said, really hope they're getting through this thing because it's just awful. It's truly bad, dude. Thank you. This is fun, man. It's good to see you.
Good to see you. Hopefully we can do it again. You got, things are, you got to clear it with people. You can't just be in the Ohm Youngmisuk business. Like, let's call up Ohm, let's have him on. Like, no, like now that we're on our own, like
you have to get our Asian godfather, Andrew Hahn, get the clearance.
Yep.
Jeez.
Clearance. We'll start leaning on him now. We'll get you back at some point. This is fun. Ohm Youngmisuk tomorrow night. Ted Wynn from The Athletic will get you ready for wildcard weekend, including Saturday's game between the Seattle Seahawks and our Los Angeles Rams. That is going to be quite an offensive showdown, I think.
All right, we will see it
all over. We'll talk to everybody tomorrow.
Dank u, Nederland.